The purpose of this video is to give you a brief, broad overview of how to compose a final capstone project for one of my classes. This is general information. There would be more specific information about the class that you're enrolled in and other parts of probably the announcement where you have found this posted. The general information I'm going to be sharing in this video is sort of a universal way to approach essay writing. It is kind of a crash course in some English composition information. I will say at the very start, if you've had English 111 and English 112 with our college, with Stanley Community College, you should already be familiar with a good portion of the information I'm going to share. Let's start with English 111. This may be a refresher for some of you. It may be brand new information for some of you. If it's brand new information, make sure that you pause the video so that way you can read some of the pages I'm going to show you. If you took English 111 with our college, you'll remember that inside the third module, there was what's called the critique. This is one of the places you might want to pause the information, the video, and sort of read through what we have here. Again, a critique would be you're going to summarize, you're going to state the purpose as you see it, you're going to assess that purpose, does the author achieve that purpose, you're going to respond in a fair and balanced way. So if you are applying these concepts to a final capstone project in one of my classes, you are likely summarizing a book in brief, maybe summarizing some information on the author's life. You're stating what the purpose of that work would be, the original book itself. You're assessing whether the author achieved that purpose. And then in your response, you want to link that information as much to the course content as possible. So you want to say, for example, if you're in my Southern Culture class, Harriet Jacobs' work is an excellent illustration of somebody who was a part of a slave-based plantation, and her life illustrates some of the gender roles that we discussed. If you're in my English 231 class, you might be linking Harriet Jacobs' work to the concept of literature. Does her work illustrate literary terms, literary concepts? If you've had English 112, you go just a little bit of a step further. This is another place that you could pause the video. Uh-oh. Technology is great when it works, but let's try that again. Okay, so we want to go here into the module. There we go. It worked that time. Inside of the third module, again, if you've had this before, you have a bit of a leg up. But inside the third module, we talk about researching and writing in the arts. So as you're writing about and assessing and responding, a good way to be able to do that is to think about literary theories. Again, you can pause here. One way that you could approach this is the biographical. How is this particular work a function of that writer's biography? Feminist, what sort of gender roles are being embodied in the work? How do they relate to perhaps culture or to our studies of literature? Formalist, what are some of the symbols in there and how do they relate to, again, culture or our studies of literature? Marxist is going to evaluate not, again, Karl Marx, not socialism. It's going to evaluate class structures. And so you might look at class as a function of the work that you just read. Historical, how does this particular work illustrate the history of this particular moment? That gives you an overview of the composition process. Now, I also want to give you an overview of how you're going to go about documenting this. Again, for some of you, this may be brand new information. For the others, it might not. My chief suggestion, if you don't already have it bookmarked, is to go to Google and to Google OWL Purdue MLA, what I've shown here. That's going to pull up as the top result, Purdue Online Writing Lab. When you click into that, you can see that that should carry you straight away into the MLA style manual. If you have a book, it's already going to contain this information. Otherwise, we always strongly suggest using the online website because it contains a consistent update of this information. So the formatting and style guide is going to give you some overviews. I would highly recommend coming down to the MLA sample paper because this is what I'm going to expect your essay to look like no matter what your class is going to be between, again, my Southern Culture or my English 231. Download this. There's a button right there. Print it, whatever you want to do. But make sure that your work looks something like this. They've done a great job of being able to explain it. Don't put extra spaces in there. Don't put pictures in there. I do not accept extra spaces or pictures. I will remove them, and then I will judge your work based on the length that it is without that extra content. Also, make sure that as you create your works cited page, MLA Works Cited right there, electronic sources, So make sure that you follow along with this. Chances are pretty good you're going to be using an electronic source. You're not going to be citing an entire website. That means you cite every single thing that's on the website. So I always give the example of the CDC. If you cite the entire CDC, you're not only citing maybe if you're doing a paper on cancer, but you're also citing cancer, AIDS, HPV, coronavirus, all of the things. You don't want to do that. Instead, you want to cite a page on a website. As much as possible, use peer-reviewed scholarship as a part of your work. As a general reminder there, make sure that you come over here to the main Stanley webpage, current students, library, and then because we're already discussing it, Harriet Jacobs, you could type that straight into the box there. And then here we go, scholarly peer-reviewed. And we want to limit the publication date to maybe something like the last 10 or so years. That's the most recent scholarship, and these should be pretty accurate, fair sources for your forthcoming final essay. So use these sources, make sure you document them. By the way, as a bonus, if you go into, say this source right here, whenever it loads, there should be a button over to the side that allows you to automatically cite that right there. Cite, make sure that you have it set to the latest version of MLA. See, this is by default set to APA, so we want to make sure that we scroll down to the latest MLA version, click on that, and there you go. Now we have that works cited information. We still need to format it the appropriate way, but that's a good first step. Okay, another general broad thing, this comes from a lecture that I do in English 111. Again, this is the information I was showing you a second ago. Your essay needs to at least look like this at the very top on the first page in MLA format. If you don't know how to put information into the header, do not type it into the body. That is incorrect. Send me an email, and I have a video that walks you through step by step how to go about putting this information into the header. As well, your name, my name, it's just Mr. Bowman, class, date, title. Make sure the title is centered. All right, this is a fairly long lecture, so I'm going to skip a good portion of it, but I did want to make sure to at least show you that very first portion. What I want to instead skip down to is the elements of formality that are contained within language. This is universal, no matter whether you're in, let's see, whether you're in the Southern Culture class or whether you're in the English 231 class. Your essays you need to make sure your essays look like this. Elements of language in brief. Do not use contractions. Again, you can pause the video here on this particular slide and you can read through it. I have a couple of pieces of advice about some common homophone mistakes that people make. It's and its, whose and whose, but you do not want to use contractions in formal prose. Make sure you use active voice as much as possible. Active voice is what's at the very top right there. Tim kicked the ball. This is the person doing the action and then the thing receiving the action. Passive voice actually takes that and reverses it, and then it sometimes will drop the subject. So the ball was kicked by Tim. The ball was kicked. And it's because the subject, Tim, the person doing the action, is not technically the subject any longer, which is why your English instructors do not want you to use passive voice, because it takes away accountability. That's really what it is at the heart of things. The most famous quote that illustrates this is mistakes were made by BP, and this is what BP said to avoid legal responsibility after they dumped millions of gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. All right, next thing. Make sure that when you're using longer titles, you use italics. When you're using shorter titles, use quotation marks. Long means books, novels, movies, things of that sort. Short means articles, chapter titles, television show episodes, not the show itself. So that's a pretty simple, straightforward rule. Do not repeat. If you're repeating the exact same information throughout the entire essay, you need to go back and reconsider the approach that you're taking. Avoid absolutes. They just tend to get you into trouble. There's a really great example right there. If you abbreviate something, abbreviate it, spell it out only one time, abbreviate it inside parentheses, and then thereafter only use that abbreviation throughout the rest of the essay. Some students will write their essay on something like the NAACP and then try to spell it out over and over to lengthen the paper artificially. It takes me literally 3 seconds to fix that in your essay because I use Control F. replace, and then replace every instantiation of National Association for the Advancement of Colored People with NAACP, and now your essay is the link that should have been. So I will do that. Again, 3 seconds worth of work, and I can fix what is a mistake in your work. Avoid jargon and slang. That's always a good idea because jargon and slang, they're not universal. LOL, so for example, here is intended to mean lots of love. Avoid idioms for the exact same reason. These are not universally true. So a little bird told me. A little bird told me in English means that I don't want to tell you my source, but somebody told me. That is actually not a saying that is used in something like Spanish or French or Portuguese or Chinese. This is uniquely an English construction. Avoid personifying or anthropomorphizing information. In other words, don't give it human characteristics. That's just a really great all-around suggestion. Okay, that should give you some sense. I just will add one more in there. Avoid you as much as possible because it directly addresses the reader. The example I always give is if you were to say in your essay, when you were pregnant, you will notice your body going through changes. I inevitably highlight that particular term and say, I'm a man, I cannot get pregnant, you're not talking to me. And so just it's a great idea to ignore and avoid you when you meet a specific group. So for example, you would say when a woman gets pregnant, her body goes through changes. That's what you actually mean. Okay, again, this is just universal advice. If you're in one of my classes and working on a capstone project, all of the things that I've discussed in this video apply to the essay that you're constructing. Again, I'll be giving specific information inside of each class, but I wanted to do one broad general overview since it's going to help everybody equally the same.